Greetings from South Denver, just out here enjoying one of those classic Denver spring days where there's still snow on the ground, but it's also sunny and beautiful and the birds are chirping. Hey, video today addressing what I believe are the most common questions about Denver, Colorado. These are some of the most common questions that have been asked to me, and then just some that have been revealed from a simple Google search of the things that people want to know most about what Denver's like. So I have 8 questions and I'm going to do my best to answer them in my own way. So let's hit the desk and get right to it. And real quick, right off the top, Sam Newman, Denver real estate agent. If you find value in these videos, I would love to explore the opportunity of helping you buy or sell a home whenever that time comes. So like I said, 8 questions, the most common questions about living in Denver. Number 1, how expensive is it? Well, expensive, of course, is relative, but I will tell you this. If you look at the website bestplaces.com, which provides a ton of data about living in all sorts of different places, including the cost of living, Denver is 27% more expensive than the average in America. So whatever the US average is, Denver's 27% more expensive than that. So to compare this against some other cities, Denver is more expensive than Phoenix, Arizona, which is 13% higher than the national average, and less expensive by quite a large margin than Los Angeles, which is 61% higher than the average. And if you look at another website that ranks these things, PayScale, you'll see that a lot of this in Denver is driven actually by housing prices. If you look at utilities or groceries, according to PayScale, the cost of living in Denver is actually below the national average. But housing, they say, is 36% higher than the national average. And anecdotally, yeah, that makes sense. There is an affordability issue nationwide in housing right now, but especially in markets like Denver. There's just such a shortage of supply that's driven housing prices up. Combine that with high interest rates, and there you go. The median single-family home price in Denver right now is right around $650,000. And again, this depends on context. If you're coming from a small town in the Midwest, this is going to seem insane. And if you're coming from San Diego, that's probably going to seem insane, but in a different way. Can't get anything for under $1 million in San Diego, or so I am told. Perspective makes all the difference. One city, for reference, with almost an identical cost of living, Portland, Oregon. Portland and Denver are both 27% higher than the national average. Next question is, how good is the public transportation in Denver, Colorado? And the answer, it's okay, but it's not great. If you're living in a very central neighborhood and you do everything within a small radius, you're walking to a lot of places. And if you live in the suburbs or farther out, or you got to commute, chances are you're going to drive. Denver does have, like most big cities, a fully functioning public bus system. It's okay. It has a lot of the challenges that a normal public bus system would have. We also do have a light rail, which where it works pretty darn well, but it's pretty limited in the areas it services. There's a number of different light rail routes. I find that the most usable light rail routes are up and down the I-25 corridor. So north and south, basically from North Glen down to the Tech Center. If you live on this corridor and you want to get somewhere, it's actually pretty convenient, pretty easy to get downtown, Union Station, Ball Arena, whatever. It's a nice way to get to and from and not have to drive. And then also going to and from the airport, the light rail is pretty darn good. Union Station to Denver International Airport, which is way the heck out there to the east, is actually a pretty easy, cheap, and kind of fun trip to take. I prefer doing that rather than driving or taking an Uber, but you just kind of got to be where one of the stations are to make it worthwhile. So public transportation, average at best. Next question, how cold is it? Short answer, not as cold as people typically think. Here's the deal, we do have seasons and we do have a winter, but it's nothing like the winter where I grew up in rural Minnesota, where it freezes in October, November, and doesn't thaw till May. Denver's winters are more lively and eventful than depressing, most of the time. We do get snow, but it'll snow and then it'll melt and it'll snow and it'll melt and then it'll be nice for a week or two and then it'll snow again. It's not actually that much snow, but it is a winter. It's not uncommon for us to get a snap where it'll be 70, almost 80 degrees in February for a few days or maybe even a week. And it's also not uncommon for us to get one of those insanely cold snaps where it's below 0 for 3 days in a row and nobody goes outside. Like I said, lively, and it keeps it interesting. So for reference, the average high temperature in January in Denver is 44 degrees. 44. Certainly not Southern California, but not North Dakota either. And a lot of what you see about Colorado in the media or on social media or wherever is actually in the mountains, where it gets very, very snowy and stays snowy for a long time. Even just to the west of the Denver metro in the foothills. So we're talking Evergreen, Conifer, Indian Hills area. The snow will stick around for longer. They'll get more snow and then the snow will stay longer. And then going all the way to the west, a few hours into the mountains past the Continental Divide, that's a completely different climate. That's a much snowier climate, which we like in Colorado because that supports the ski season. But that's not an accurate representation of what it's like to live in Denver. Denver has a mild winter, typically, and then a hot, dry summer. Next question about Denver. So is it in the mountains or what's the deal? And I basically just answered this one with the last question, but no, Denver's not in the mountains. It's actually extremely not in the mountains. And this is a common misconception because of the aforementioned advertising and media and ski industry and all that stuff. Denver is on the plains next to the mountains. So Denver and the metro itself, pretty flat, but just to the west, that's when the things start to get fun and rocky. It depends on where you're coming from in the metro, but typically it's going to be about a half-hour drive to get to the beginning of what we'd call the mountains. So we're on the doorstep of the Rockies, but not in the Rockies. And that's one of the things people love about living here. They love having access to all that stuff, but still having a normal, thriving metro area to live. Next question, how are the schools? Answer. Not because they're bad. That's not the reason I give that reaction. It's because it's so complicated. So much so that I did an entire video breaking down basically everything you need to know about schools in the Denver area. I will link to that video below. But the short answer is this. Overall, the public schools in Denver and the surrounding areas seem to be pretty good. Many people are comfortable sending their kids to public schools. You don't hear a lot of people who say they're going private school, or at least no more than anywhere else in America. The big thing is that the state of Colorado does have open enrollment, aka school choice, which means you're not tied to your neighborhood school. So you get more choices in where your kids are going to go to school, which is a thing that many people find beneficial. Like I said, it's way more complicated than this, and it takes its own video to describe it, so I made that video. Next question that comes up a lot, do I need four-wheel drive? The answer, no, you do not need it, but it is recommended. If you're gonna make a go of it here and you want your life to be as easy and as prosperous as possible, I would recommend having a four-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive vehicle. I've lived here with two-wheel drive and I've lived here with all-wheel drive, and it's much better with all-wheel drive. Two reasons for it. The truth is, most of the time you don't actually need it, but when you do need it, you're gonna want it. First time is when it snows. When it snows in Denver, it's helpful to have all-wheel drive. They do their best, and they actually do a pretty good job of clearing the streets, but even with that, we can get some pretty intense snowstorms. Like I said, sporadic and periodic, but they can be intense. And if you want to go anywhere, like to work, the grocery store, take your kids to school, whatever it is, it sure is helpful to have that confidence of the all-wheel drive or the four-wheel drive. If you haven't experienced the difference, it is a huge difference when you're dealing with snow. Still got to be careful, still got to brake, but you don't really worry about getting stuck. You can be one of those people who, okay, if it snows a few inches, I'm not going anywhere. That's fine. Then you don't really need it. The other place that all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive comes in handy is going to the mountains. If you're someone who's gonna want to go to the mountains in the winter, if you're a skier or a snowboarder, gosh, it is really advisable to have all-wheel drive, because again, there are gonna be some days where the roads are completely clear and you're not really gonna need it, but the terrain up there gets a little hairier getting to and from the mountains. It's not bad, but it's different from driving in town. And number two, if you're like me, the times you want to go snowboarding or skiing are the times that it has recently snowed or is snowing. That's the best. That's, in my opinion, the whole reason to do it. Fresh powder. But you got to get there, and to get there, you're going to have to get through some snow, and having all-wheel drive makes it so much better. Okay, we got two more questions, and the last one, spoiler alert, is the most salacious. But the next question is, how's the altitude gonna affect me? And the answer, like so many things, it depends. But here's the deal. The reason Denver is called the Mile High City is because it's at about 5,280 feet above sea level. That is, ladies and gentlemen, 1 mile. And if you're coming from a place much lower than this, such as sea level, you're gonna feel a difference. Now, how big a difference you feel depends on your own physiology, and it's hard to know. It really does seem to vary by person. But if you're coming from sea level, those first couple days, you're probably gonna feel a little different. You might get out of breath a lot faster. You're gonna get dehydrated faster. And some people might even get some altitude sickness, though Denver typically isn't high enough to bring that out in folks. So if you take her easy for a few days and drink a whole lot of water, usually you're going to be fine. How long does it take to acclimate to the altitude in Denver? It can be up to a week, but typically people are acclimated and don't even really notice it within 3 days. Now, if you're going up to the mountains and going to stay in a town like Breckenridge, for example, Breckenridge is at 9,600 feet, almost 10,000 feet, which is a huge difference even from Denver. People from Denver going to Breck can have problems if they're not prepared for it. So imagine coming from sea level and going straight to Breckenridge. That you're going to want to be ready for it. You're going to want to be really careful. Bring some liquid IVs, stay on top of it, and just be ready to lay low in case things get a little squirrely. But yeah, typically hydration's the big one, and if you enjoy a cocktail from time to time like I do, keep in mind booze is going to hit you harder at elevation. So even coming from sea level to Denver, it'll sneak up on you. So just be careful. Now the last question, this is not really one I get that often, but this is one that popped up a bunch when I started Googling it. What do you not like about living in Denver? And this I thought was good because we always talk about, what the great things are, but from someone who's been here for a long time, what are the things you don't really like? And for me, obviously the pros outweigh the cons, but I have a few of them. Number one, winter kind of lingers. We talked about the winter and that it's not that bad, and it's not. It's nothing like where I grew up. But we're here in late March when I'm recording this right now, and you saw it outside. It's nice, but we just had probably 2 decent snowstorms in the last 4 weeks, and I'm just over it. I'm done. Those nice days, those sunny days tease you enough. In between those snowstorms, we had a week where it was in the mid 60s. And at this point in the year, I'm ready for it to be done. And I know we're not. I know we probably have one more big snow coming and ready for spring. So that's one thing. Number two, honestly, and I don't get very political. You probably know if you've watched this channel. I don't. It's just not one of my interests. I think we've had pretty weak leadership in Denver for the last decade or so. And I think that has caused some issues in the city that some folks are going to have to make some hard choices to figure out. It's the same thing you're seeing in cities like Seattle, Portland, LA. When we talk about homelessness, when we talk about downtowns just not being the best places to go, I don't think our problems in Denver are anything like those cities that I mentioned before, but we're like a light version of that. And so it's not bad. I go downtown all the time. It's not a problem, but I'd like to see it awesome. And I feel like we can get to awesome without that much effort. We just need the people in power to have a spine, which apparently is a lot to ask. Last thing I really don't like about Denver, this is just a basic one, but traffic. Traffic has gotten worse since I've lived here. It's probably going to keep getting worse. That's what happens when people keep moving to a place, and some folks choose to complain about that and say, no, go home, but come on. Number one, I moved here from somewhere else. A lot of people did. And even if you were born here, who cares? That wasn't your decision. When a place is good, people are going to move there. And our population globally is growing regardless. So we're going to have to figure out what to do with more people rather than just say, go somewhere else, which is a stupid thing to say to somebody. So where I think it's headed is, yes, traffic, it's not awful. It's not LA, it's not New York, but it's going to keep getting worse. And I just think we're a city, and this hits on the previous point too, we're going through some growing pain, and we're going to have to go through those growing pains. So there's a number of big civil projects going on, widening some freeways, making things bigger. It's not anything anybody loves to see, but we got to find a place to put these cars or work more on public transportation, which would be a good idea too, if you can get people to buy in. Everything's going to look a whole lot different in 20 to 30 years, but it's just one of those things we got to go through. That's all I got for you now. If you're interested in a breakdown of the different Denver neighborhoods and which one might be right for you, I recently did a video on that, and I will link to that here so you can check it out. Otherwise, you are my favorite. Thank you for watching as always, and I will see you soon.